Hi everyone, I'm Leanora Minai, editor for Working at Duke and Executive Director of Communication Services. Welcome to Working at Duke Conversations. Today, I am so pleased to have Antwan Lofton with us as a guest. He has just been appointed Vice President for Duke Human Resources, but that is not his first time at Duke. Antwan served in an interim role since April of 2022. And he was Assistant Vice President for Staff and Labor Relations and Staff and Family Programs since 2017. Antwan has worked in human resources for more than 20 years. So we're going to cover a bunch of questions, some of which we received from you, and we won't be able to get to all of them, but we've collected them based on themes. And I want to thank everybody for sending in the questions. So I thought we would start today, Antwan, with one. Just if you could tell us about yourself. Where do you come from? How did you get to Duke?
Such a loaded question, but first, thank you so much for inviting me to be with you. How did I get to Duke? I think that process started before I was ever aware. So I was born at one of our neighboring hospitals, and I had difficulty breathing. And I was airlifted after being on Earth for an hour to this magical place called Duke University Hospital. So it was there that I actually got that first chance to breathe independently. Fast forwarding the clock, I think the last time I was on campus as a child, I was probably 9 or 10. In the chapel during that time, they used to have something called the Messiah. It was an event that they would have every winter holiday. It was a choral event. And I remember being 9 or 10, attending that event, and to date myself, back in those days, you could park on either side of Chapel Drive. So I remember being in the back seat of my parents' car as we were leaving the chapel, on my knees, looking in that back window, watching the chapel get smaller as we would drive away. Had no clue. Fast forward the clock, many years later, I would be returning as an employee. Many people think that I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., because I spent most of my career in that area. But actually, right here, the Research Triangle Park is home for me.
Awesome, Antwan. And I've heard you talk about the beauty of campus, and particularly the chapel, and the importance of these landmarks and such a pretty campus that we have in the community, and that's been really important to you as well, those moments of walking by the chapel and seeing that. So thanks for remarking on the chapel. So as I mentioned, we got a lot of questions from folks, and so one thing I want to do is name some of the people who sent in the questions. So if you hear your name called, we have a little prize for you afterwards, so we'll be getting in touch with you. But this question comes from Sarah Dunn Phillips at the Margolis Center Operations. And Sarah asks, with inflation on the rise and the performance review process around the corner, are there plans to address the declining purchasing power of compensation?
Very good question. Not just unique to Duke. All across the country, we're asking that exact same question. Last year, or a little over a year, we polled our employees or surveyed our employees to hear what is it that they feel that Duke is doing right. What are some areas that we feel or that they feel that we can calibrate? So we have made a commitment with senior leadership to look at equity studies as well as pay across the university, and that work has already started. So more to come as they develop and build out what those next steps are. But we are so thankful to our employees for voicing their concerns.
Thanks for that, Antwan. We look forward to hearing more from you on that. Moving off of that to the remote hybrid work question, we had a lot of questions about that. And this one comes from Nick Clavijo over at DCRI Business IT. Nick asks, how are the addition of new states to work remotely coming? Can you share the plan on which states will be added and in what order? What is the long game?
So very good question. Right now, I think we're sitting at 17 states, not including Washington, D.C. But we are constantly looking at where we can best support our employees as they work remotely external of Durham, North Carolina. There's a full listing that can be found online of all of those the states in which we'll do business in, and we will also continue to update the university as well as the health system as those states continue to roll. But right now, we're looking at 17 states to include Washington, D.C. Now, I will add to that statement around remote work. Not too long ago, Leanora, I think you and your team ran a survey and was asking how is it working in the Duke community. If I'm not mistaken, it was at 39%
Yeah, I'm looking
of individuals that are working remote. That's looking at about 1 to 4 days
Correct.
a week. That's major. That is something that we plan to keep in place while giving senior leadership of each of those areas in which people work that flexibility to look within their own units to see what positions can continue to work remotely.
Right, that makes sense. Thanks, Antwan. Moving off of the hybrid remote work, let's turn to the DEI initiatives. And this question is from Working at Duke. Can you tell us more about the role Duke Human Resources is playing in the overall work to advance racial equity at Duke?
A couple of things. One, we're trying to work very closely with not just the Office of Institutional Equity, but also the President's Office. Many of you may be familiar, he rolled out an entire statement around his strategic plan around that work. So a couple of things that we're doing now. One, we're taking a deep dive and look at our current policies and procedures just to ensure that we are doing what is best for our employees, that that whole angle or that lens of diversity is being placed there. Taking a look at the hiring process or transfer process to ensure that we're doing the correct things there as well. Working closely with the Office of Institutional Equity to also start taking a strong look at affinity groups that we have here at Duke to ensure that everyone feels inclusive or that they feel included, which is tricky, going back to one of your previous questions, when you are looking at the fact that in the past 3 years, the bulk of our hires have been remote. So what are we also doing to make sure that they are embraced within the Duke culture as well? So many items, many things going there, but we're constantly working with OIE to move those forward. Hiring practices, pay transparency, ensuring that we are looking at protected classes, and then also keeping the community involved in those decision making.
Right, I think it's real important to make notes of that. And then also over at Working at Duke, don't forget we have the Working Toward Racial Justice series where in each issue we're writing about and reporting out on individual schools, departments, and units who are taking action for racial equity at Duke. And so listeners, if you have people or teams who are working toward that, please reach out so we can get your stories covered in the print publication as well as online. Moving on now to benefits. We have a question from Sarah Zubek over at World Food Policy Center, and Sarah asks, how does Duke decide what benefits to support for employees?
Very good question. So we listen to what our employees have to say. We have multi-generations that are here. We take it into consideration. We also look at the different medications that we're spending a lot of money in here to look at what programming we want to change. We look at the recruiting needs, what's going on in the country, yet again, to see how do we continue to be that number one employer or that employer where everyone wants to work, that destination employer per se. So we're constantly taking a look at those. And we don't do it just once every 5 or once every 6 years. We're constantly looking to see what are some highlights or some tweaks that we can make.
And some of those, just can you talk a little bit about, there's been some amazing announcements and enhancements to things to benefits, like the PAS program. Can you talk about a few of those?
Just to chat a little more about PAS, how many of us found ourselves during the pandemic either feeling isolated because we were staring at a computer screen all day and we really had no one to speak to? In many cases, there was still a family unit. There were 2 people, maybe a spouse, children, or a dog, but in others, or a cat, but in many situations, it was an individual that was alone. So we wanted to make sure those same services that we had in place for our employees before the great shutdown, that those items were still in place during the pandemic as well as post the pandemic. So creating avenues, multiple avenues, where our staff members or our employees can get the assistance or counseling services that they need was very important. Not too long ago, we actually opened up a new clinic, an office in Wake County. I mean, you're looking at the numbers of individuals that are driving in from Wake County as well as Johnston County. We wanted to make sure that we had services or venues that were available there. We also have some online counseling that's taking place as well. So many things are happening there. While we're chatting about that benefit piece, we also took a strong look from around parental leave to ensure that our employees had the appropriate leaves in place that could assist them there as well.
Yeah, I've just been really impressed with Duke's progressive thinking in terms of the benefits. You mentioned PAS. We've got now, if you're out of state, and help me here, that if you're out of state, there's previously with PAS, it was only for in North Carolina, but now remote employees can get the services through PAS out of state. So that's new, right?
Absolutely.
And then why don't you, because this one's the most recent, tell us about the enhancements to the Employee Tuition Assistance Program, another amazing benefit that Duke offers.
Well, I think that is the main thing that we try to highlight. We never want to box ourselves in, that we've learned and this is as far as we can go. So Duke has always been one of those employers that believe in professional development.
Right, and with the Employee Tuition Program, what's changed there, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that now the waiting period is reduced to get the employee tuition. Watts School of Nursing has been added. And what else? We've got, you can now you can be outside of North Carolina. You could go get an advanced degree at an institution in California, but be based in North Carolina, correct? These are all new.
Absolutely. And the Watts School of Nursing piece was major because that's also helping us as it relates to recruiting our nurses. So, historically, if you were not accredited by SACS accreditation, we were unable to allow you to go through that program. But now that has been changed, and that has made a huge impact, particularly when trying to recruit and retain nurses.
Yeah, right. I can't wait to hear more of how
More to
benefits are
come.
changing
More
with
to
that.
come.
Let's see. In closing, let's talk a little bit about you. So why don't, if you don't mind sharing, obviously the pandemic was an incredibly difficult time for many, especially those who've lost people. How did the pandemic change you? How do you see Duke change? So it's kind of like a twofold question there.
So let me start with the last part, and then we'll work back to me personal. How have I watched it change as it relates here at Duke? Prior to the pandemic, our deans or our VPs, they definitely valued the work and displayed the value of the work that they had for human resources. When the pandemic hit, it really made them take a strong look at recruiting strategies, the human side of human resources. How can we better support our employees? So while a lot of people were talking about when things go back to normal, I'm very thankful for the wonderful team that I get to work with when they were asking, what are the things that we now get to adopt from almost the corporate America? If you recall, many years ago in higher ed, working remotely wasn't something that we necessarily did. So we are borrowing from the things that we learned during the pandemic as well. How has it changed me? It has made me stop and really think about how we look at professional development. When you look at the calendar, Leanora, and you notice that individuals that started working here 3 years ago, in many cases, for some of them, outside of an onboarding or their orientation, they're working remotely, they're working in different states, and they haven't had a chance to really step foot on the Duke campus. It's made me really stop and evaluate, how do we position professional development for those individuals? We chatted before this program started about some of my earlier career moves or things that I was able to do in my youth. I'm not that old, but I've definitely aged some. But one of the most prized moments that I will never forget was being at work in a hallway or walking across a parking lot when someone in senior leadership had a chance to engage me in conversations and to talk about what is your 5 year plan. This position that you're in right now, how do you foresee that positioning you for advancement? Those are opportunities that I remember being in the workforce. So this pandemic is stretching me to really examine how do we ensure that those same examples, those same resources, that same school of thought is being implemented for not just those that are on site, but those that are working remote as well who may not have those parking lot or hallway experiences.
Right, that's a good point. And I go back to the employee tuition program for the fully remote employees who may be in another state or who are in North Carolina. They can now get an advanced degree
Absolutely.
in another state, which this wasn't the case before the pandemic. So, well, Antwan, I want to thank you very much for being our guest today. And these are meant to be brief conversations, but also shedding a light on just our workforce topics and issues. So if you have any suggestions for topics and leaders for the future, please reach out to Working at Duke at working.duke.edu. That's the website where you can find a form that says send us your news through the human resources link. But I also have a little goodie for Antwan before he goes. We've got a nice Working at Duke bag that you can do your shopping at the Duke
Wonderful.
Farmers Market. So that's for you. And then also 2 shirts, 2 special proud to be Working at Duke t-shirts, different materials so you can pick your
Wonderful.
favorite for you. So
Very
wear these
nice.
proudly, of
I
course.
will.
Proud to be Working at Duke.
And I'm going to pick this one because I
Okay.
think in another one, first of all, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you. Thank you and Paul Grantham for the work that you're doing for being the voice of our employees. You had an article out at one point that was talking about Healthy Duke.
That's right.
So be it that this one looks like it's going to wick some of that sweat off of me while I'm actually trying to work out here or there, I'll definitely utilize this. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks for listening. See you next time.